Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy. I'm from a channel called Red Means Recording. And, oh no, my aesthetic. And today I'm going to show you how I can use the Native Instruments Maschine Plus to sequence, manipulate, and sample stuff from this Eurorack system right here. For those that aren't familiar with Eurorack, it's a standard of music instrument technology that lets things fit into these little racks and you patch them together. And in some cases, it makes things a lot more fun. And in some cases, it takes a lot more work just to get the simple things you would out of a synthesizer. But there are some really, really cool sounding voices out there, cool effects, cool things like that. And I love it to death. And I've been working with the Maschine and this setup to try to get the best of both worlds. So before we get into making the track, I want to explain how this is working here. So the Maschine has the ability to sequence MIDI externally, meaning that it can send MIDI messages out to external hardware synthesizers and effects, and you can sequence them with the Maschine. It also has the ability to take audio in and either just process it through the internal effects or sample it and resequence it however you want. When you plug a class-compliant audio interface into it, like the Native Instruments Audio 6 right here, it will be able to use the MIDI and audio channels coming in and out. So that's what we're using here. We have this audio interface from Native Instruments plugged in via the USB cable directly to the Maschine Plus, and we're using it to grab audio from this thing here and also send MIDI out. Because Eurorack speaks control voltage and not MIDI for most of the time, we need something to translate between the MIDI messages coming from the Maschine Plus into Eurorack standard, which is voltage, actual electrical voltage. And that's where the square per mod comes in. So this MIDI cable here is coming out the back of the audio interface right here, and it's sending these channels out, these three channels out, to the voices I have in this rack, which are the Noise Engineering Maschine TRAKTOR, Mutable Instruments Brad, we'll call it Brad, and the Qubit Surface. You'll hear all of these in action in a bit. So it's taking the note on event, which is the gate, and sending it into our gates and triggers, either to our envelopes or directly into the voice itself. And it's taking the MIDI note information, the note I'm actually playing, and sending it out through the CV output here into the 1 volt per octave of these things. That's how you get Eurorack voices to do the things like normal synthesizers do. These voices are passing through VCAs and envelope generators, and this filter over here from Mutable Instruments Blades, which I love to death, and then it's passing into the IntelliGel Quad VCA. And the reason the Quad VCA is in play, this is the last stage before we take the output into the audio interface, is because Eurorack levels are much hotter than regular line levels. And if I was to take the signals directly out of these voices and try to plug it into my audio interface without a pad on the audio interface, it would clip. It would just be too hot to handle. So the Quad VCA allows us to actually set the level of these outcoming voices here and basically act as a little mixer so that we can turn things down so the audio interface can handle the levels that we want it to. So what does all this mean? Well, it means that I can go into the Maschine and set up some channels to now send out MIDI into our HRMOD and then into our voices. I've gone back and forth on the best way to do this, and I'm still learning, but for right now, I have one group on the Maschine Plus right here set up to send 3 sounds out, and each one has its own MIDI channel and audio channel. So let me show you how that works. If we go to a group and hit one of these pads, we go into one of the sounds, and we can then adjust its settings. I can also go to the keyboard and play it like this. Beautiful, right? I want each one of these to send out MIDI on the appropriate channel, and I also want it to accept audio on the appropriate channel. So to do that, we hit this macro button, and we go into this page. If I go over to output, the first thing I want to do is go to the MIDI settings here and pick the thing that is sending the MIDI data out. In this case, it's the Complete Audio 6, which is the interface that's hiding under here, and I have it set up so channel 1 goes to channel 1 on the Square per mod here. So see that we get a reaction from that LED, and our Maschine TRAKTOR lights up. If I go to pad mode and go to my second sound here, and I go back into the macro settings, you'll see that I have output MIDI, same audio interface, channel 2. And this goes to Brad and into the filter as well. So that's the MIDI aspect of it. What about the audio aspect? Well, it's done on the same page. So I'll hit macro, go over to input, and you can see audio source in. And I have all of the inputs available to me on the Complete Audio 6 right here. For instance, Brad here is plugged into channel 2 on the audio interface. So that's what's going on there. So this page here, this macro page, or setup page is where you're able to set the ins and outs of your Maschine Plus in order to get external hardware to play with MIDI and also with audio. You might notice that I have a bunch of effects going on in here, and if you know Eurorack, you'll probably know that like those effects are not here. And that's because when the audio passes through the channel, it's going to get whatever effects you put on the sound or group, which is actually pretty cool. We are going to probably be using a lot of custom effects when we sample from this, but I wanted to have some effects on here just to sort of hear what it sounded like while I was working, because it sounds really cool to run these voices through like all kinds of effects. On group A here, I have a kit that I've come up with. So to recap before we get started, we have a MIDI to CV translator going into our voices. Our voices are passing through their effects, envelopes, and all that kind of stuff, going out through the quad VCA so we can set levels to make sure that our Eurorack level gets to line level okay. Those are going into the Audio 6 right here, which is being hooked up to the Maschine Plus via USB. MIDI is coming out of here into the Audio 6, into our Hermod, and triggering our voices that way. So there's our bidirectional travel. All we have left to do now is make a song. No pressure. No pressure. Let's get started. So now that I have this, my first sort of pattern set up, I'm going to need to start sampling stuff in so I can clear stuff out and make new sounds. So I think I'm going to set up E, F, and G here to be our manus, our braids, and our surface, respectively. So let's go ahead and make E manus, and F will be Brad, and G will be surface. So we're going to go into E and hit sampling. So I have the ability here to choose a source. I think I'm going to do, instead of resampling from that channel, I'm going to use external mono. And I think that we should see, yeah, so that's manus right there. So the goal here is to use the direct control we have over the modular gear to perform these sampling things. So I'm going to make this 8 bars. I don't know how much of that I'm going to use, but that's how I think in phrases. Usually is around 8 bars. Sounds good. Let's start recording our first Manus Ateritas sample. So now we have that dry Manus recording on there. We'll process that in a bit. All right, we're going to go over here. This is going to be our Brad channel. Go to sampling, 16 bars, and let's play with Brad's a little bit. Brad's going through our second filter here and the javelin. So we have control over a few different aspects of its shape. Braids is a macro oscillator, and we've got a ton of different models that we can choose from in here. So we're going to have a lot of fun with Brad as we make this track. All right, next up is sampling our surface. All right, so that's going to be the process from here. We're going to write and then sample and then write and then sample and slowly move through our patterns in order to get what we're trying to get. So the idea is just to add some texture and stuff. Got a lot of little crackles in this kit. This envelope generator is doing the filter modulation for our Manus over here, which is just, gosh, I love that sound of that. We're going to sample that. So we're just going to move fast, sample, and then worry about the arrangement later. We're just going to iterate, add, layer, and then I'm going to do the arrangement as sort of a separate process. The synergy here is about sound design, performance, grabbing, and then I'll worry about how to put all that together later. Manus Ateratos, you are a beast. Holy moly. Surface also has a bunch of different models in it. It's a physical modeling synth. We got like plucked strings and bass drums and electric pianos. Really diverse. That's why I like it. Let's go over to our drums, make a new pattern. So we got a hi-hat. We also got this. So I'm going to start instantiating this as a, what do you call it? As a snare. All right, so we've gone really big with extended, like sustained lines. You know, we got that big energy from all of our stuff up here. I think for this next pattern, I'm going to go a little bit more rhythmic, like a little bit more like syncopated, and try to get a little funkier with it, okay? go ahead and sharpen up our envelope. Manus's filter envelope is from Peaks right here. We're running Brad through the Javelin, which is a VCA ADSR, which is really, really nice because it takes care of our VCA duties, which is what amplifies and subtracts from our volume, and it does the envelope based on the controls as well. So it's all built in there. I have these envelopes molted actually. So the envelope signal coming out of this is going into the modulation controller. So we can get some nice little envelope-based modulation on that, which is really cool. The same thing is happening with the Manus. We're generating an envelope when we trigger it, even though technically this doesn't need that. And that envelope is being used on Blades over here to give us that classic sort of like filter sounding envelope. And Blades is a great filter. It can get real nasty. All right, that's pretty funky. Now it's time to sample it all. So let's do that. That's such a cool sound. The other thing that's cool about putting Blades after these two is that these are digital modules. All of these are digital modules, but Blades is an analog filter. One of the nice things about Eurorack is like you can put analog filters really easily in your signal path, and you don't have to have like some external thing. It's like it's right here. If you want to put an analog filter on a voice, you can do it. So yeah, I think that's cool as heck. So one thing we haven't done with the sampling thing yet is what I would consider sort of a multi-sample thing. By making a sequence that is our, we call it our scale that we're working in, we can actually sample that and slice it so that it becomes something that we can play one-shots with, sort of like doing a multi-sample of a synth. So that's what we're going to do with this pattern. We're going to do it a couple times with different settings for each thing, just so we have something to play, maybe, if we want it, when we're doing the arranging stuff. All right? All right, so we're going to sample that now, and then change our settings and sample that probably at least one more time. The other cool thing about this is because it's a monophonic synthesizer, like nothing is going to overlap, so you don't have to worry about those like cutoff points. Now, it's going to be interesting whether or not it's going to be able to slice this. So let's find out. So here, sampling, 8 bars, start. All right, slice. Let's see. Detect. Yeah, I thought it was going to have a bit of an issue there. Let's see. How close is that? Oh, that's perfect, actually. All right. So apply to here. Okay. We are all slicer on. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. All right, I'm going to do the rest of those to here off camera so that you don't have to sit through all these wonderful minor scales over and over again. And then we'll see what's next. I have done a bunch of sampling, and now I have a bunch of multi-samples from these. And some of them are really nice, like this surface plucked string. When you have something sampled in here, you then get access to the sampler. If you're not using the audio thing, you have access to sampler, and you can do things like tune it. You can decide whether or not it's going to be monophonic or polyphonic. You can reverse it, which is going to be real fun later on. And you also have access to like sample rate reduction and filters and stuff like that. So it's cool to resample. I really, really like resampling. It gives you another level of control and sound design over things. So at this point, I have gotten a lot of stuff into the Maschine Plus. I want to start doing the arrangement, which means I'm going to start building scenes. And in case you don't know, scenes are like collections of patterns. So I'm going to have to start making decisions about what I want in each scene to make the song progress. I'm not going to do that on camera because it can be a slight bit tedious. I want to explain to you what I've done after I've done it. So I'm going to start arranging. I'm going to start building scenes. And I'm also going to make decisions about whether or not I'm going to put my effects on the per sound level or the per group level. And let me explain what that means. When we've been sampling our stuff in here, we have been passing it through a series of effects like distortion and reverb. Like the Manus has a whole bunch of stuff on it. So we've been hearing it like that, but our samples themselves are dry. And I did that on purpose. I want to be able to make decisions per sound, whether or not I want effects. And that means putting them on the sound level as opposed to on the group level. Essentially, what we've been doing is like, even though it's been on the sound level, we basically created a group that had effects on it as we passed stuff through. And now I'm going to make decisions on a per sound level, whether or not I want those effects. So a lot of control. It might get a little messy, but we'll see. I'm going to keep an eye on my CPU and see how it goes. I'll be back in just a second to explain a little bit more about the next stage. It's been about an hour and I have my arrangement. I wanted to walk you through real quick what I did to the different sounds so you can get a sense of the processing going on here. After that, I'm going to go take my dog for a walk and I'm going to come back and add some risers using the noise oscillator and braids here. But we're almost done. The arrangement's pretty much done. I just got to add the bells and whistles. So let's start with the drums. Nothing really changed with them. I did add a new group over here, C, which has the performance shaker, which is a built-in percussion module in the Native Instruments thing, and this clap. Because I wanted just like a nice snappy stereo clap to add to this. It's very much become like a sort of dark progressive track, so that clap adds just a little bit of spice. So in our group for Manus, what do we got going on? Well, I did end up going with the per sound effects chain, so I could really dial in each section exactly how I wanted. So we on this intro thing got some reverb and EQ, compression to squish the reverb in, and some chorus. I also got rid of a little bit of the bass in it because it's not supposed to be fully in. It's just supposed to be intro thing. We got a sidechain compressor here on the intro bass with a little bit of stereo beat delay with the color way up in the high frequencies so that it's mostly focused on just getting that attack sound in some space. This is the first main in bass. We have an EQ with a tiny bit of the 24 kilohertz frequencies taken down. The old reverb, the legacy reverb, with a little bit of a super high focused space just to make it sound cool. So, sidechain compressor, and then beat delay again, doing the same thing it was doing before. This is the big growly version of the intro bass, and it's got all the same stuff that we had on the previous one. I really like putting reverbs before my sidechain compressors because it squishes down the whole giant sound when the kick hits, and it just feels really, really big and cool. Didn't use that one. This one I ended up taking from a bass sound to a more like high frequency sort of like growly sound. And I used a little bit of bit crushing in the sampler and a high pass filter built into the sampler with a chorus on there. Our one hits got some similar processing. It just sounds so good. Over here on the Brad's channel, mostly sidechain compression and chorus. These are a lot drier, at least these two rhythmic things. This big old like harmonic thing got the reverb and sidechain compression treatment, and it just sounds massive in the thing. I love taking harmonic sounds that have like shifting, like almost like guitar-like harmonics, like when you have a feedback loop on your electric guitar. And I like running those through giant reverbs because it just sounds real cool. So you can see a lot of the similar processing per each thing, but they do benefit from having the individual effect channels for sure. Over here on our, surface track, Really short reverb on this little friend. Didn't use that. This actually appears pretty much dry as a percussive thing. I did use a little bit of sample rate reduction to give it that crispiness, which I really, really like. This got a tiny little bit of room reverb, not much. This just got completely blown out with reverb. We're almost 100% wet, and a little bit of a distortion to make it sound, I don't know, a little bit growlier, a little bit more guitar-y. Again, super dry because this sits in the mix as a percussive element. Didn't use that. Our one-shots, some of them got really, really processed. I think my favorite one, I have two favorite ones in here. This electric piano sound, which is one of the surface models, I reversed it and added a bunch of reverb and compression. The compressor, again, comes after the reverb because it gives us this hard, distressed sound where all of the spaces are sort of like pressing up against each other, and I really, really like it. I like to distress my reverb sometimes. It gives them this crazy urgency. And then finally, the pluck string thing from here. This is probably the most cool chain that we have in here. So we have an EQ to get rid of some of the bass, a big reverb, and then the grain delay. This thing is so cool. So let's turn it off real quick. Very, The Box by Orb. Something like that. Anyways, let's bring that grain delay in. So the grain delay, you can pitch things up, and then you can reverse the grains, and then add a little bit of cloud. It's kind of like clouds, the module clouds. Hear that just cool reverse sort of like cloud thing going on. So don't sleep on the grain delay. It's a really, really cool processor. Oh, it's so cool. Okay, so again, I'm going to add some risers from braids or from an internal sample thing. I'm not sure yet, but that will be the last thing that I do in here. So let's recap real quick what this video was about and how it worked. This video was about using the Maschine Plus to sequence and sample stuff from a Eurorack system using a MIDI to CV translator, the Audio 6 from Native Instruments to pull the audio in and sample it into things in here, and also to send MIDI out to our stuff. We used 3 voices, the noise engineering Manus at TRAKTOR, mutable instruments braids, and qubit surface. And we ran Manus and braids through blades, the mutable instruments dual filter, which gave it a really nice growl. Finally, we ran all of that into the quad VCA over here from IntelliGel in order to manage the levels coming out so that we could put it into a line level thing like the Audio 6 and not clip. And then we really just kind of played. We grabbed a whole bunch of stuff from these sequences. We played with the knobs to give our performances a lot of life and really take advantage of the hands-on and unique voices that we have here. And then once we had a whole bunch of stuff, we did some multi-sampling where we basically played a sequence that was just the minor scale and sampled a bunch of versions of here. And boy, those came in handy. Like, that's what that is right there. I would not have been able to do this without it. So multi-sampling your external synths is really, really fun. Then we arranged, and now we're almost done. I'm really excited to play this for you. That will be the next thing. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate you joining us here. And I hope this has inspired you to maybe use your Maschine Plus in a slightly different way. Or maybe you are already doing it. I don't know. Let us know in the comments, all right? My name is Jeremy. I'm from Red Beans Recording. Thank you for sticking around with us here at Native Instruments. And yeah, take care. Bye.